What is up, everyone? My name is Joseph, and today I'm going to help you gear for Slayer. Now, I've made some similar videos in the past, specifically how to gear for melee, ranged, and magic, and in those videos I gave an ideal purchase order for items in order to get the most damage for your money. However, while I do think those are good in a general sense and as guidelines, I do understand that they fall short in some more realistic situations, and primarily Slayer. When training Slayer, you use a lot of different combat styles to complete different tasks, and it may be difficult to know when to buy one piece of melee equipment over ranged equipment if you're on a limited budget, and those videos don't really address that. And I've been asked quite a few times to give my opinions on Slayer as well and how to gear for Slayer. So when trying to come up with this video, it's very difficult because a lot of people slay very differently, and there's no one set path on how you have to slay. You can use range for one task where someone else uses melee, so it's very difficult to determine that. So I actually built a website that really acts to give you this buy order. So what I want to do in this video is a few things, is explain how to use this website first off, and in the second part of the video, I want to explain how it works and really the behind the scenes. So to start off, this website is fairly simple. I tried to make it as simple as possible and really contains three main steps. On the first step, all you need to do is input your skills, so your attack, strength, defense, ranged, and magic levels, and then hit continue. On the second step, you need to pick the Slayer tasks that you normally do and which combat style you normally do them with. There are a few additional options. For example, if you select melee, you have the ability to select protection prayers, and if you select magic, you have the ability to select AoE, which is basically bursting a task. So if you burst Necreals, you would select magic and then AoE. Now, I don't have the option for protection prayers on ranged or magic because I have to make a few assumptions here, and I'll get into this towards the end of the video, but just to reduce the amount of options and toggles, I did have to cut some things out. So I'm making the assumption here that if you're using magic or ranged, you are able to safe spot the enemy. Now, I understand that's not going to happen 100% of the time, but for a phase 1 build of this project, I felt was an assumption that I could make without really jeopardizing the order. I don't think it really would affect the list really that much. So once you select all of the tasks that you do on a regular basis and the combat styles you use, click the continue button, and the next page you get is really the ideal buy order for all of the different items that you will want to get. On the right hand side, you'll see a table with the minimum required items that you should really have before starting Slayer. I wouldn't suggest starting Slayer before having these base items, and these builds are very cheap. The most expensive piece of equipment is going to be the Slayer Helm or Black Mask, but the melee, ranged, and magic builds are relatively cheap, and you really shouldn't have to break the bank to get those base builds. And then on the left-hand side, you'll see a column that really just gives you the next item to buy. And this is determined based on the price of the item and the actual offensive bonuses that it gives, and the defensive ones as well, if that's applicable. So the DPS increase you see on screen here, that's comparing it to the previous item. So for example, Dragon Boots will give you X% better damage than Climbing Boots, and etc. So it's not a straight increase of damage overall, it's the percent increase over your previous item. And that's really it. That's all there is to the site, and that's how it works. Now, there are some additional features that I plan to build in the future, and if you want to look at those, there's a link on the top right of the screen that says features and updates. Click on that and it'll give you a short list of things that I have planned for the near future. And if you do have something to suggest or something you'd like to see in the site, be sure to let me know, either in a comment on this video, send me a tweet, or join my Discord and let me know there. I'm very readily available through Discord and Twitter, so if you want to contact me about something, do it through there. But that is how the site works. Again, very simple and not too much to it. So now let's get into how this site actually works and what goes on behind the scenes. So step 1 is pretty straightforward. It's just getting the stats for your character so we can make some calculations in further steps. Step 2 is really where it gets a little bit in depth. So what it does when you select different tasks is it builds an average monster. And this average is based off of all of the selected monsters' defense levels, attack levels, strength levels, etc., all of their bonuses, and it's weighted by their task weight. So if, for example, you pick a task with a task weight of 10 and you pick another task with a task weight of 9, the defense bonuses of the monster with a higher task weight will matter a little bit more. And the reason for this is because you'll be assigned that task more often. If you're not sure how Slayer works, I do have a video devoted just to explaining that and how Slayer works and how task weights work. But very simply, the task weight determines how often you're assigned that task. So the monsters or the tasks with a higher weight, their defense levels will matter just a little bit more. So step 2 builds this average monster as well as determining how often you use the different combat styles. So that's all there really is to step 2. Step 3 is where it gets a little bit more complex with the DPS calculations. The formulas I used, I'll leave a link in the description to the DPS spreadsheet I used as a reference, as well as the forum post that kind of explains it overall. And based on the formula that I was able to get from those two sources, I'm able to calculate the DPS per item based on your stats against the average monster. So I'm able to calculate the DPS increase you'll get from an Abyssal Whip or a Saradomin Sword, and I can put that all into a list. So after the DPS numbers are all calculated, the next step is to calculate the damage reduced by that item if it's a piece of armor. Now again, like I mentioned before, I did make the assumption that if you're using mage or range, you are safe spotting. So this only applies to melee armor, and it only applies if you did not select protection prayers. So if you selected protection prayers for all of your melee tasks, it will not calculate defense. But if you didn't, it runs a quick calculation to find how much damage reduced this item gives, or how much damage this item reduces. And it does this by calculating the enemy's monster's DPS on you and how much DPS it does on you after you equip this item. So I'm able to find the amount of DPS reduced based off of that. The next step is to get the price for each item. Now, I am getting these manually. It only takes me about 3 minutes to run a script I wrote to get all the prices, because if not, your load times would be incredibly long. So if the prices look just a few days out of date, that's why. I will try to update them every few days, but just keep that in mind. So it looks to get the price from the list that I create and then divides the current number by the amount of gold that it costs. So if it's a weapon and it only has DPS, it divides the amount of DPS that weapon does by the cost to give you a number that is the DPS per GP. So the amount of DPS you're getting per GP spent. And the last step of this calculation is to weight that final number by the combat style. So if you use melee 100% of the time, all ranged items will be weighted by 0%, so they won't exist. If you use melee 75% of the time and ranged 25% of the time, the melee equipment will be weighted by 0.75 and the ranged equipment will be weighted by 0.25 in order to reduce the frequency that ranged items pop up since you are using melee more frequently. And based off of that whole calculation, we get a ranking number. And then the list is just sorted by that ranking number. And really, that's all there is to it. If you want to look at the code or the actual calculation, this is open source over on GitHub. So I'll leave a link for that in the description as well if you want to take a look or improve it. I do want to say real quick that if you do notice something that's just incredibly off, let me know. I do want to make sure this is as accurate as possible. So if you notice something that just seems really off, please let me know. I am still actively working on this, adding to it because it's a fun little project. I did want to kind of release it as I think it's at a stable point now, but if you do see something wrong with it, feel free to contact me. Either use the issues tab on GitHub or tweet me or send me a message on Discord or follow my stream, whatever you want to do to contact me. Get in contact with me and correct me if I'm wrong. Trust me, I'm open to criticism. If there's something blatantly wrong, I will definitely look into fixing it. But really, that's all there is to the site. I tried to make it as simple as possible. Again, I did have to make some assumptions, such as using Neve as a Slayer Master and some other things in terms of combat styles used or attack styles like accurate or rapid. I did have to make some of those assumptions ahead of time based off of what I thought would be most commonly used. If not, I would have had to have a million options and toggles for the user, and I didn't think that was a really great user experience, and I don't think it affects the order at all. I ran a few calculations and a few numbers manually, and it didn't look like it would affect the order at all, so I felt like it was safe to make those assumptions. But that is all I have for this video. If you are still watching at this point, I don't normally do this, but I do want to ask you, if you enjoyed it and if you enjoy the site, please share it around. I did spend quite a bit of time working on this, and if you found it helpful, I would love for you to send it to someone who also could find it helpful. I'd love for this to get out and to be useful. Maybe a little bit selfishly because I put so much time on it, but I do think that it can be a valuable resource to people who aren't sure what to buy next while training Slayer. But that is, like I said, all I have for this video. I hope you guys did enjoy it, and I will see you next time.